MPP Bobbi Ann Brady. It's our monthly podcast. How the heck are you?
I'm pretty good. It's Friday and feeling pretty good. Had a great week up at Queen's Park. So all is well, Dave.
All right. So this month, because I always just throw stuff at you, I thought I was going to make it a little more fun for you. Okay. So I've got 5 topics. You pick a number, and that's the topic we're going to start with, because I know you're on a short time frame today. So I thought, well, this way it's not me dictating. It's random. So pick a number and let's go at it.
Okay. So my favorite number is 5. So let's start with that.
Number 5 is, well, look at this. Let's turn this page and see what it's about. It's about True Experience in Dunnville.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about that? I saw you were totally for that. And can you elaborate? Because I wasn't there and I don't know what happened. Tell the folks of Haldeman Norfolk what it's all about.
So True Experience and the Haldeman Norfolk Housing Corporation recently got $1.7 million to create 9 beds in the area for vulnerable people. I got to hand it to the Haldeman Norfolk Housing Corporation, Matt Bowen there, and obviously the people of True Experience. These folks they understand the type of housing that is needed in our area. And it's kind of outside the box thinking, but it does meets the need especially in the Dunnville area, and we see it now in Simcoe as well, that it's the type of housing that we need. So vulnerable housing would be for people with addictions or mental health issues, and it's just such a good news thing. So when people say, an independent can't do anything, they can't bring money to the area, that was nearly $2 million last week that was announced in Haldeman Norfolk. And, that's cooperative efforts. That's True Experience working with the Housing Corporation, and, me supporting those ideas and going to Queen's Park and saying, hey, I know this has been put forward. This is something that my area really needs. Let's get it done. So, it's just fantastic when you see that type of cooperation, just getting the job done. So, in my news release, I said that, this is the type of housing that we need everywhere. We need it. My cat is playing with the screen again. This is the type of housing that we need right across Ontario, the outside the box thinking. So, I really think that Haldeman Norfolk is we are setting the standard on these types of things. We're showing the rest of the province the interesting things that you can do, the partnerships that you can establish to create those wonderful outcomes for your community.
When you see things like that, successes, and you would do, and I remember last month we talked about the tour you went on, Northern Ontario. I mean, these are ideas you can share too with them, correct?
Oh, absolutely. This is the type of thing that would work well, say, in Kenora. It would work well in Peterborough. And, I know all those communities, they brought forward to the table during Finance Committee pre-budget hearings. They brought forward their own ideas. But this is a model that's, you're going to see the results very quickly. And we toured some of the properties that True Experience already has set up in Dunnville. And they just do such a fantastic job. I mean, True Experiences, I love going down there. They have a cooking course now where they teach folks how to, use things out of their pantry, like dry goods to, I still call them dry goods to create a dinner, and, and do things economically so you can feed your kids, you can feed your family, in the most efficient way possible. And these are just the wonderful life skills that the people down there are, at True Experience are teaching, some of those in the community who just need a little bit of hand up, right? Not a handout. They need a hand up. So my kids tell me that I need to go take the cooking course. So I have committed. I have committed to doing that at some point.
Yeah, like you have time, right?
I know, I don't have time to
cook. When you brought that up, one of my associates, a person that I do some work with, they said to me, growing up, he lived on the street. And he said, I didn't do drugs or anything. I just had nowhere to live. Like, you know what I mean? It was in that scenario. And he said, most people are 10% away from falling into that hole. And I was like, wow. Like, when you think about it, and then you see these, like you said, with this build, it's excellent. These are things that we got to really understand. And with the changing economy and the cost of everything in the last 6 months, last year, we got to be realistic. We got to help these folks.
We're seeing more and more of it. And, you know, the government talks about building all these homes, you know, 1.5 million new homes over the next 10 years. But my fear is, who is monitoring the types of homes that are being built? We need two types of housing, and I'm like a broken record with this. We need affordable housing, and we need housing that is affordable. So we know affordable housing is for those vulnerable people or for the people who may be on fixed incomes. But housing that is affordable is also important. I mean, the average cost of a home in 2022 in Norfolk County was $830,000. Who can afford that? Nobody can afford that, right?
All right.
So, you know, you can quickly become homeless because you can't pay the bills. And, you know, there was a budget released yesterday, and I really don't see anything in that budget that is going to make life more affordable for Ontarians. I think 2023 is going to continue to be a really, really tough year for families. And I see it on our streets. You know, there's a situation in Delhi that people continue to, there's the cat's tail. There's this situation in Delhi, you know, there's a gentleman who is homeless, and, you know, people are trying to help him, but, you know, there's nowhere for this gentleman to have a shower. He's living, I think, outside one of the factories, in town, and people give him money for Tim Hortons, things like that. And, you know, the guy's, he's just a man who's fallen down on his luck. And, yeah. Your friend is right. I mean, it can happen to those who are one day, you know, somewhat successful in paying their own way, and all of a sudden, you know, something bad happens and they have to use the little savings that they have. And my goodness, it breaks my heart.
Okay, that I really appreciate that honesty on that question. Hey, do you know what number Bobbi Orr was?
Bobbi Orr. Oh my goodness, I can't remember what I
number. You just say 4.
4, number 4.
Oh,
Bobbi
okay.
Orr.
So there, yeah. So
it rhymes.
So that's your number. I'm just gonna let you pick that number 4 because it leads into the other question.
And I proclaimed to be such a hockey girl, and I had to question.
I caught you off guard. I didn't prep you for that one. But anyway, so you picked number 4, and number 4 question comes from a constituent in Waterford. Justin wanted me to ask you about your thoughts on commercial residential property. Now, he says that's a mixed property, and there's lots of those in Haldimand, Norfolk, and Brant. Are you open for that to be developed into middle income class homes or townhouses? And he referred it to as infrastructure, meaning downtown. So what he's asking is, would you be open to the idea of, let's say in Delhi or Waterford or Dover, where there's a bunch of rundown buildings, let's take those, make them into townhouses, or let's build it up. All right.
Absolutely. So that's what we need to do. We need to intensify instead of stretching the urban boundary and creating homes on land that is agricultural land or land that is productive. Take those places in the downtown and intensify, and you can do really interesting things. You can have let's look at the model of Indwell. So the residential spaces are above, and then you can have like the commercial spaces underneath. You can create stores and retail outlets underneath. My goodness, that is like the best way to intensify. That's the best way to create housing in this province. And, you know, I think that if you're coming to Ontario and, you know, you want to work here, you want to, you know, be in this province, then I think one of the concessions you might make is that, hey, I'm going to live up. I'm not going to have the, you know, ranch home on an acre of land out in rural Ontario. I'm going to live where the infrastructure actually exists. So he's absolutely right. Go where the infrastructure already exists. Right now, what we're doing is we're building in places where you have to spend so much money to put in the necessary infrastructure to service all of those lots. And what does that do? Creates an $830,000 home.
Right, exactly. And to his point, his follow-up was on that from the provincial side, is there a way around all this red tape? Because he says to me, that's where all the red tape is. That's why you don't do it, because, you know, all of a sudden you're trying to blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that, and you need the county to approve this, and you need this to be done. And he said, by the time it comes down to the end, financially, it's not worth it. He said, maybe there's another concept that we need to look at where, you know, we could do that, but maybe it's somebody else buying up all this property and saying, okay, let's do this. Let's make that middle income or low income family or housing so that people can have it in town and still have all the amenities and still afford to live.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, he's absolutely correct. And the red tape associated with getting something done like this. I mean, this is a government who is saying, hey, let's cut the red tape and let's just get her done. Well, here's a situation where then give the municipality, if you're telling the municipality they have to pave the way for developers and you got to soak up the development charges and everything else, then you know what? Allow the municipality to, get rid of the red tape and get something like this done in our small towns too, and allow them to intensify so that they're not looking at things like stretching out the urban boundary. And we see that, we're seeing that in different development proposals in some of the towns like Delhi. There's a meeting Monday night. So
we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And Bonnie Crombie, when she was before the Committee for Finance, she talked about that as well. And, when I go for a walk in Toronto, which is seldom, but sometimes I need fresh air when I'm there 12, 14 hours. And, there's a lot of room to grow up. Right. Yeah. Some of those buildings are pretty, 2-3 stories. Some of the historical buildings, again, it's red tape because somebody would say, well, that's a historical building. We can't do anything to it. Well, we continue to bring people to this province when we want to feed them. We better start looking at building up instead of out.
Okay. You got 1, 2, or 3 left. What's the next number?
2.
Bill 60. Ooh, that's a bit of a hot topic too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you recently wrote a piece on this too, as well. I'm pretty sure you did. And there was a meeting recently in Port Dover about it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you my thoughts first, just to, rock the boat a little bit. I've heard it from both sides. I've seen what Doug Ford's saying. I've listened to what local people are saying. I kind of agree on both sides of the coin. My fear is with the provincial government, this turns into a buck of beer fiasco. I don't want to see that. That's where I kind of fall off the wagon a bit and go, you know what? I don't know if I want you guys playing in this.
Right.
Your thoughts?
So I agree. I mean, we've seen private healthcare done. I mean, we've all used Life Labs. There's, at the meeting in Port Dover, I asked how many people had been to the Shouldice Hospital and a few stuck up their hand. And I said, and how'd that work out for you? And they said, pretty darn good. And I said, that's where private healthcare can actually be done. That's how it's being done properly. But I understand the fears. I get it. With this government who has said, we're not going to pave over the Greenbelt, and all of a sudden they're paving over parts of the Greenbelt. It's hard to trust, right? So the trust factor is there. And, I think that we have to do something differently in this province right now, right? There's a backlog of surgeries. There's a backlog of all sorts of things created by the pandemic. And, we can argue all day long whether or not those things should have been shut down during the pandemic. But we have created this huge backlog in all facets. So we need to clear that up. It is a model that's being used in other jurisdictions across Canada. It's being used in other jurisdictions around the world. And it is proving to be successful. That being said, I do worry about where are we going to get these healthcare workers. So, it's great that you're moving them from, these surgeries from the hospital to this clinic or whatever you're going to do with them. But where are you getting the staff? Because all I continually hear is we have a staffing shortage. So I worry about the poaching of staff, right? So you have a private clinic now who can say to, nurse A, B, and C, I'm going to offer you this amount of money. So what I tried to impart on the crowd in Port Dover a few weeks ago is that we need more answers. The lack of information is what's creating kind of the scary scenario. Try and say that 3 times.
No.
So it's creating awareness, and it should, because like we said at the outset of this question, is that this is a government who is not fantastic on keeping its word. And, I'll go back to it's funny because people still blame Mike Harris for all sorts of things. I mean, Mike Harris's name came up at this town hall a few weeks ago, and I'm just shaking my head and I'm going, oh my goodness, right? And then, of course, the Conservatives talk about Dalton McGuinty. At some point, stop talking about history and just fix it. You are living in the moment. You are the government of the day. Fix the problem. But the one thing I'll say about Mike Harris is when he said he was going to do something, whether you liked it or not, you could bet your bottom dollar he was going to do it. This is a government where they're very unpredictable. So I understand why people are skeptical. If we were looking at a model that very much paralleled that of Life Labs or the Shouldice Hospital, then I think people would say, yeah, those things have proven to be successful. But we don't know exactly what it looks like. And they've been very short in their answers on what. There's 3 steps to Bill 60 and getting the job done. And so they've been really, really short in answers on the last step, step 3, which is the oversight. So you got to come out with some better answers, I think.
You go to Shouldice, you pay. Mm-hmm. And here's this is where when you get down to the root of the problem, my biggest fear is down the road, there's no healthcare for low income. Like you said, everybody's been poached. There's a have and a have not complex or, tier that comes into play eventually. And you slowly see that erosion. And boy, I go back to the disappearing middle class. I go back to the haves and the have nots. And this is one of the areas where I'm concerned. Yeah, I think eventually you're going to have a 2-tier system. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm going to go with you on this and say, gosh darn, make sure you got it right, because this is something that's critical to every Ontario person. Like you just can't mess this up. And people need it. Like I know there's long lines. I know there's long waits. Mm-hmm. But you got to have some system. Like you said, how do you fix a broken system? I don't know. But I also know people can't afford it. If they have out of pocket, if they have to, if they have to pay, boy, where are we going, right? Where are we going?
And there's so many different angles. I mean, there's an argument out there that if you and I can afford to pay, then we free up space in the public system for somebody who can't. But the staff have to be there, right? The services have to be there. The infrastructure, the modernized infrastructure still has to be there. Sylvia Jones, the health minister, and the premier have, said multiple times, this is not a system where you will pay with your credit card. You will pay with your OHIP card. Well, I hope
Let's wait and see, I guess, right?
I mean, hope so, yeah.
You're taking them for their word on this. And, I know that you will keep pushing the envelope and asking those tough questions, because we need to know. Like, before this can be passed, you need to know, right? It just can't be one of those things like, this is what we're going to do. We'll tell you later. Let's pass the bill, because it affects a lot of people. And I agree with you on the poaching. I totally agree. Like, that's going to happen instantly. And those people deserve to be paid properly. But again, then let's go back to the government. Why aren't we paying properly in the first place? ONA still doesn't have a contract, right? So, we've already seen it with agency nurses. So there's something out there called agencies, and they provide nursing services across this province, and they can offer more money and shorter shifts to nurses. And the problem that we have now is that they have poached from the public system, but now the public system can't get along without the agencies. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So some of those agency nurses are going into the hospitals. The hospitals are now having to pay for that service because they don't have enough staff to fill that gap. So now we're in a position where, agency nursing was a horrible thing for the public system at first, but now we're going, but wait a minute, without them, we can't survive. And I said this multiple times on committee. When people came to the table, and let's be honest, most people come to the table for finance committee because they want more money.
Yep.
And I said to a number of different delegations, I said, at some point you have to stop throwing money at a problem, and you got to figure out what the problem is, because we see in the healthcare system, the government continually throw more and more money at a system that gets continually worse.
Yeah.
You wouldn't run a business like that.
Yeah. And the other part let's talk for a second about the positive side of this. A company like Genetics, and I've talked to you about them, private, test ticks so that people know if they have Lyme. But really great, but they're private because nobody wants to do the work, right? And here's something that's, it's going to help literally thousands of people within the province. And things like that I see that as, yes, that's a great private business that can do the job in conjunction with health units. And you know what I mean? That's lessening the burden on them. So in that aspect, I think there's a lot of good that can be done. And I'm just using that one for an example. And I'm sure you have examples too, like we talked about Soldice and the labs. I mean, those are great examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I say, I'm skeptical too. But I do see that we have to do something different in this province. We've got to start thinking outside the box, because the system is failing Ontarians terribly. It's
the country too. It really is. It's all across the country.
Yeah. And then we have the federal health transfer payments, and I'm going through the budget page by page, this weekend, and I started last night, but those federal transfer payments, well, there's strings attached to that too. And
of course,
I've received my fair share of emails from folks who are very, very concerned with the digital ID aspect, and that's part of that package that deal Trudeau made with premiers. And some of the premiers said no thanks, right? So it all comes with a price tag, and it's not always in our best interest. And there's just so many questions out there, that are unanswered, and that's what creates fear and skepticism, and rightfully so. I mean, we've went through a few very difficult years where people lived kind of day to day, not knowing what was going to happen the next day. And when you don't have the proper, plan to go out there and say to the people, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it, and you're not upfront with all the information, it scares them. And I think that the government could get away with that previously, but the past 3 years have taught people to really question things.
Both federally and provincially too. Mm-hmm. I think that's an important aspect to say here, because a bill gets passed and people don't even know, right? Like, and most people wouldn't, and then all of a sudden it affects their life. And they're like, well, nobody told me, right? And I think that educational component is so critical. Folks, you got to look at what's happening so you understand it and form your own opinion. Me and Bobbi are all about that. Get your own opinion on this stuff, because that's the important aspect, as long as you educate yourself.
Yeah, and I'll point out too, you're exactly right. Bills pass and people don't even know. And I get that. But let's take that down into simpler forms. When I was meeting with a group the other day about a proposed development, one of the things that they said to me was, it's just so hard to get people, they all sit and they complain about this, but they won't come out. They won't come out of their home and help us fight this. Right. Until it's too late, until the subdivision that you don't want is being built, and then you're really, really angry. Well, guess what? It's too late at that point to come out and argue.
Do you think they feel powerless? Like, why? Like, I get that. I think there is this group in the country that sort of says, well, my vote doesn't matter anymore, right? You proved that wrong, but I mean,
absolutely.
But I think that's part of it, is like they're not empowered with self-confidence or self-esteem enough to get out there and say what they think to help. And I'm with you. If you got a problem, think of a solution. Bring them both to the table, not just one half.
We can all just curl up and say, my opinion doesn't matter. I could have done that. I could have last spring, I could have said, you know what, this is just the way it's going to be. And I could have went off and, sat and licked my wounds in the corner for a bunch of years. But no, when you feel passionately about something, stand up and be counted. You may lose, you may fail at the end of the day, but at least that right. You've stood your ground. And, I guess I'm just a different. We're
both ranting now. Eh? We're not solving anything. We're both just ranting.
No, but my advice to people would be, don't give up. Right?
Yeah, me too.
That's what people want us to do. They want us to give up.
We got to move on. Question 1 or 3.
3.
3. All right. Well, you're really taking a long way to get to number 1 here, aren't you? Your article on the I think it was powder kegs with old wells, yes, and you were talking both about the provincial and federal government and how funding needs to be in place, because I didn't realize how many there was when you brought up the number. I was like, holy,
crazy.
You know what, right?
Yeah.
Talk about this.
There's 2 separate issues here, and I know this stems back the gas wells that private owners use and license, the problems with them stem back a long way. I remember Tim Hudak and Toby working on this years ago when I worked for Toby, and those are wells that farms, families operate their properties on. There's a lot of folks in Haldimand County who rely on these natural gas wells, and they may have started as a commercial well, and when they became when they didn't produce enough natural gas, they were then handed over. The landowner who bought that property could then operate their home and their farm or their barns, whatever, on these natural gas wells. Those are all very tightly monitored. So the license holder has to license it. They have to maintain it. They have to have it inspected. Those are not the problem in Ontario. I will say right up front that I support a landowner who has a licensed gas well using that gas well for whatever they choose to use it for. The problem is with what we call legacy dormant wells or abandoned wells across Ontario. And southwestern Ontario was ground central for those. In Norfolk County alone, we have over 2,600. I think it's 2,634. And we all know that the one at Silver Hill has been in the news since 2015. And I don't live far from that well. And I feel terrible for the folks who live right there because I know what it smells like on any given day on my property in Lindock. And and it creates all sorts of health hazards. And we know what happened in Wheatley. And I've had some folks who have reached out to me since Monday when I asked this question in the House about gas wells, and they said, well, Wheatley, we don't, the jury's still out on whether or not that was a gas well. Well, it may have been an old water well, but there was still gas leaking into it to cause an explosion. So it doesn't matter what kind of well it was, it exploded. And experts predict, and there was a recent Globe and Mail article on this, but they predict that southwestern Ontario, there will be another Wheatley at some point. It's just a matter of when. And, Wheatley, we were very fortunate that there was no loss of life. But these gas wells, they can create a really, really bad situation. And I get it. I get that the government doesn't want to go and spend all sorts of money, say, here in Norfolk County, which they have given money. I will credit them. They have given money to help remedy the problem in Norfolk. But the problem in Norfolk, and the county will tell you this themselves, number one, they don't have the expertise to deal with this problem well. They don't have the money or the expertise. And one more well, like this one at Silver Hill that leaked since 2015, one more like that could bankrupt us. It costs that much money to fix those, to remedy those wells. And then the other problem with them, Dave, is that you have a difference of opinion on how to actually deal with those wells. So some people say cap it. Well, if you cap it, you're going to create the whack-a-mole effect, and you're just going to have one more. They're just going to go right on down, right? So you're opening Pandora's box when you deal with one, because the province knows we deal with one, we're going to be dealing with thousands across southwestern Ontario. What they need to do, and I was very heartened, Graydon Smith is the minister, and Graydon's a very good guy to work with. I've been working with him since I came to Queen's Park on gas wells, actually, behind the scenes, and he gets it. But I was heartened to hear that he is pressing the federal government for money. So the feds have given money to the West to deal with gas wells out in the West. It's time that the Justin Trudeau government come to Ontario and say, okay, we're going to deal with some of these problem legacy wells in southwestern Ontario. So Graydon Smith did say in response to my question on Monday that he is leaning on the feds to do that. So I'm optimistic. And then the other, on the licensed gas wells, their farmers and licensed gas well owners received a letter, I believe it was last September, that said that their licenses would not be extended past September. I think it was September 13th, 2032. That's a bit concerning, because that, to me, that means that after 2032, these folks are not going to be able to access natural gas on their property through their well. And so I'm also working with Minister Smith and saying, look, no. Like in rural Ontario, in Haldimand County, largely in my riding, some of these farms are operated with these natural gas wells. So we've got to ensure that there is a system in place so that they can continue. They're not the problem. You can't just say, okay, we got a gas well problem in Ontario and paint every single well with the same brush. So there's two very distinct issues when it comes to gas wells.
I agree with you. I think if you're running a well, you're meeting all the requirements and it's working fine, leave it alone. On the other side of this, is this like with the legacy wells, is this like $1 billion cleanup? It's like, it's up there then, obviously, what you're telling me is this is way
huge.
More than, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember the number on Wheatley, but that explosion, I mean, and it's going to cost a lot to deal with a problem well, but man, if it explodes, if you have chaos and well, let's just say if you lose one life, there's no price on that, right? But cleaning up after an explosion is going to cost far more than dealing with the legacy well in its form that it's in right now.
That's thanks. This is really enlightening. I didn't realize the depth of this that we're going to on these gas wells. I know. Do we have time for the last one? It's number one. Do we have time for it?
Yeah, for sure. We can't shortchange this.
It's kind of funny because I thought, well, she'll go to one sooner. Like I thought you'd go sooner, but it was about Bill 62, your private members bill. First of all, great on you for doing it. You got to do those things, and I think, in my opinion, by putting it in their heads, sometimes one of those lessons I learned in life. Sometimes it's better, to share an idea and let people think it was their idea to get the job done. And I know that that's probably a little bit of your backroom thinking here, because you're saying, I'm just going to throw this out there, guys, but it'll come back to you in some other form, I'm sure, with the provincial government. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, I don't think enough people understand the work you have to do just to put a private members bill in play. And you got 28 votes. That's pretty good. That's damn good, really, because you're an independent. So and people are starting to listen to you, which is nice. So
they are. And so it's not the votes that I'm hanging on to. So for the listeners, Bill 62 was the Farmland and Arable Land Strategy Act. And it was my private members bill. So every depends, maybe year and a half, a member has the ability, there's something called a ballot list. And when your name comes up on the ballot list, you can bring forward and debate a private members bill. And it can't be a financial bill. It has to, it can't cost the government money. So mine was to develop a committee made up of people from across Ontario, not politicians, because we see those committees at Queen's Park made up of politicians. I sit on one of them, the finance committee. But I was very careful that I didn't want to create another political committee, because the balance of the votes at this point in time would still be in favor of the government. So I wanted this to be a very honest approach, so that a committee could get together and make recommendations to the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and talk about how we save and protect Ontario's most productive land. And we know 319 plus acres is being paved, is not being paved over. That's a bit disingenuous. Is being lost in Ontario every single day. Much of it is being paved over. Some of it is being lost to aggregate mining. And some of it has to do with fluctuating commodity prices, where it just becomes vacant land. And so then we see these things where, the municipality says, well, we're going to stretch out our urban boundary. We're going to change our official plan and do this, that, and the other. And that's how we continue to lose productive land. And so I had, the support that I had for this private members bill was staggering. The Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Christian farmers, the beef farmers, the Ontario dairy farmers, all the federations of agriculture, people from right across Ontario, farm organizations from right across Ontario wrote letters of support for my private members bill. Individuals from every riding across Ontario sent me emails saying, thank you for doing this, because we are very afraid. And people from outside the area are very afraid about their food security. This is a food security issue. The pandemic taught us that if we want to continue and enjoy life like we do in Ontario, we need things made close to home. We can't rely on other jurisdictions. And if there's one thing, and I'm like a broken record with this one too, if there's one thing that I want made close to home, it's my food. So, the pandemic was scary in the sense that for the first time in our lives, we saw empty store shelves. It was scary for a number of people. So the U.S., it's happening in the U.S. too. I could talk all day about this, Dave, so you might have to cut me off. But in the U.S., they are doing the exact same thing. They are paving over productive land in the U.S. We know that the majority of the imports that we have food-wise in Ontario are from the U.S. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if we need to import more food and it's from the U.S., guess what's going to happen to that food if they have shortages and they're now giving to Ontario? They're going to charge us whatever they want for that food. So food security is a huge thing. And let's go back to what you said at the beginning, that it's an idea, and we're not lost here. 28 votes. The Liberals, the NDP, Mike Schreiner from the Green Party, they all showed up. They all supported my private member's bill. It was a real wonderful feeling to stand in the House on March 8th, on that Wednesday night, and debate my bill and look around me and see all the people who were supporting me. And it's not lost on me that I know there were Conservatives who were supporting me as well, but they can't vote in favor of my bill. There's no free vote. The House leader made a comment in the legislature yesterday with respect to another private member's bill. That was very good, by the way, too. And it was voted down. And the NDP called him out on it and said, come on. And the House leader made the comment that they're free to vote however they wish. Oh, yeah, until they get to caucus and they're reprimanded, right? Yeah. So that's not true. And a bunch of them have said to me, Bobbi, and your bill is really, really good. Right? For a number of reasons. It's simple, but it gets the job done. And it would go a long way in finding that expertise out there that knows how to deal with some of these land issues. Government doesn't always have the answers. And so that's why I also wanted to have like a civilian committee that would look at these issues, because my goodness, you and I both know that some of our farmers, some of our farm leaders are some of the very brightest minds this province has. So why wouldn't we go and solicit their opinions, right? My friend Larry Davis in Brant County, Larry has sat on the OFA for many years. He understands these issues inside and out. That's the kind of guy you want on a committee to suggest to the government, hey, this is how you do this, right? This is how we protect Ontario's most viable land. The other thing, that really bothers me is that farmers, especially in Norfolk County, will say to me, Bobbi Ann, a speculator can drive up my driveway, knock on the door, offer me millions of dollars that I can take care of my family and then, the next generation and the next generation, and I can accept that, and they will pave over my entire farm. But if I want to put a retirement home, or I want to build a home for my son or daughter, to ensure that land continues to be farmed, I can't do it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. On that note too, one of the things I think what the general public doesn't realize on food is how narrow the strip is across this country that is farmland. Because you get anywhere north, there's rock. There's no farmland left. It's a very narrow strip, folks, and that's the thing you're not looking at, and that's where all the population is. So something's going to give. So when you start paving, good term, don't use the word pave. When you start reusing that land for things other than agriculture, you're going to run into trouble sooner or later. You're going to run out of food. So look at the big map of the country, and it's just I wish I knew the distance, because the narrow strip is so freaking narrow. And what you have in Norfolk and what you have in the counties adjourning it, that you need that. We can't not have that in order to survive all the way across the country. Mm-hmm. And that's where people don't see it. They look at this huge country and say, we got so much room, but we don't for agriculture. And that's the thing we got to understand sooner rather than later.
No, we don't. In Ontario, boasts the most productive farmland in Canada. So,
there you go.
We've got to save it. And I'm going to go back because I got sidetracked in my passion here. But during debate, the two PC members who spoke to my bill, Rob Flack and Trevor Jones, wonderful friends of mine, wonderful men. And, Rob Flack, he credited me for bringing forward the bill. And he said, there's nobody in this legislature that, is going to protect, farm country like the member opposite. And that's very, very kind. But the messaging that they were given from the Ministry of Agriculture was that, the bill is redundant.
Yeah, I read that.
The bill's not redundant because there is no committee right now to look at this. And the only other information that the ministry gave them to refute my bill is that, we're investing in soil and crop research. Well, that's fantastic if you're investing in soil and crop research, but when you go in and you pave over that soil, it becomes a moot point, doesn't it? So I remember that MPP Flack said, well, we already have the tools in the toolbox to take care of this. So in my 2-minute rebuttal, and I wish we actually would have posted that video, in my 2-minute rebuttal, I said, if you have the tools in the toolbox, is the toolbox locked?
Like, why aren't you using them? Yeah.
You need to whip those tools out and start using them. And I don't care, going back to your original point about, somebody else may take this idea and get the job done. Fabulous. You know what? I said to Rob Flack, I said to Trevor Jones, I don't care how it gets done. This is not about me. This is not about my ego and getting my bill passed. This is about doing the right thing for Ontarians by saving Ontario's most productive lands. And let's be honest, we also don't want our social fabric in rural Ontario to be changed significantly. We understand we need to progress. We need to, develop, but there's a reason we live in rural Ontario, and we want to protect that way of life too.
We could. This is another one that I like that you get fired up about it. I enjoy that, but at the same time too, it's common sense. Like if you just. And I was going to ask you, with the farm groups that you talked to that supported you on this bill, do they have a lobby group? Are they pressuring their own MPPs to say, "Hey, dude, you just turned this down. We need this." So I think that's the other ripple effect, right? Yeah.
So these are the biggest farm groups. So my private members bill was supported by the biggest farm groups in this province. I mean, OFA was actually at Queen's Park this week. They were doing their lobby day this week, which it couldn't have been better timing. And given the fact that a few MPPs from the government side pulled me aside this week and said, hey, we got to talk about your private members bill, I believe that they're really feeling their neck because, one, their OFA members, their Federation members came to them and said, hey, why the heck didn't you support this private members bill? And secondly, I have no doubt that their constituents are saying to them, what? You're a rural Ontario member.
And you're not.
You represent me as a farmer and you turn down this private members bill. So I think it's a good position that we're in with this because a bunch of those rural members are going to say, wait a minute, I'm going to have to go. My name's going to be on the ballot in the next election. And these guys, if I don't make something happen, these guys are going to remember that I didn't support this.
Exactly why I think it's going to come back in another form. Exactly why that, because they're going to just look at it and go, we need to do this. Like, I need these votes again, right? So somebody...
I'm good with that.
Me too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just do it. Just do it.
I've seen it before. I've seen it under other governments when I worked for Toby, a private member's bill that was stolen and turned into somebody else's idea. That's great. That's flattery.
Well, and as long as it gets done, right? That's the goal. Mm-hmm. Wow. Thanks for your time. We just killed like 45 minutes.
It's always so fun.
I know she probably should be at out visiting groups, and I'm holding her up. I'm sorry, folks, but usually.
You know what I'm doing tomorrow?
Oh boy. Let me just run through my mind. What could possibly be the thing that you haven't done yet?
I'm absolutely terrified.
Oh, you're terrified.
It's that a dump tank.
I was going to say I've never heard that from you, but okay. You're terrified. What town's it in?
Turkey Point.
Oh, you're going polar dipping.
I am. And I don't like to be cold. I'm the girl who wears flannels all year round.
I did it in Dover once or twice, New Year's. I would suggest one hard shot before entering the water. Your choice. And enjoy the moment. It's you know what? It's a moment of clarity. I bet you the next private members bill comes out of this dip tomorrow.
We'll see.
We'll see about that, she says. Great. It's for a great cause.
Absolutely.
With Ed, right? Ed's doing it? Yeah. Ed Sanchuk?
So it was actually Jeremy Renton and Alicia Divenstein, both with the Norfolk County OPP. So Alicia's a good friend of mine, and I know Jeremy too. And so Alicia says to me the other day, I think she hoodwinked me because she sent me a text and she says, hey, do you want to do the plunge with me on Saturday? And, I thought, I can't mull this over very much. I have to just give her an answer. I said, sure. Exclamation mark. And she's like, great. And then I talked to her a day later and she's like, yeah, I'm going to be helping out at the registration desk. I'm like, what? You're not going in?
And that's how you set up a politician.
It'll be great.
Enjoy the water. Maybe that'll be the next month's our lead-in topic is like Bobbi Ann takes swimming lessons at Turkey Point. I don't know. And make sure that young lifeguard is there to save you if there's any trouble. I want to make sure.
I'm going to pick him.
All right. You take care, and I'll talk to you next month.
Thanks, Dave.